Thanks, Andrew. Good morning. It's still in the morning. When I reviewed the situation, I've looked at this right from the first report suggesting that transition take place in Surrey. And when I look at it from my role as a senior police manager during my years as the RCMP and with my experience as a Solicitor General in the province, I couldn't understand where the information was coming from that led the province in this direction for this transition. Public safety is core, as the minister reiterated several times today in the House, and that's the lens that I put on this as well, looking at it. The information was not there. The province has been very reluctant to reveal the information that they used, that the minister used in arriving at his decision to move forward here. And here we are today, where they are usurping the sanctity or the decision-making process that municipalities have in deciding who polices their municipality. And I think this is the wrong direction to go, and I intend to look at this in depth during the committee stage moving forward here over the next few days.
Peter?
Thank you. And just to add on to what Mike has said, certainly when we've reviewed not only this legislation, but this is just the latest in a wide range of topics and issues that this government is continuing to bring a heavy hand down on municipalities. This is a piece of legislation that is changing because frankly, the government's mishandling of this file so badly, and it's created them to have to change a piece of legislation that has functioned perfectly fine on police forces and the decisions local governments make around who will police them literally for decades in this province. The other piece of the lack of transparency that should be very concerning is that there is provincial ramifications for municipalities across this province that have RCMP detachments that this province will not talk about. And again, the Solicitor General does not want to share publicly what the cost pressures will be. There's a shared pool and administrative cost of the RCMP. Obviously, a detachment the size of Surrey has a very large portion of the overall municipal complement in the province of BC. Those costs are going to be now shouldered by all the other municipalities up there that are over 5,000 people that have RCMP as their police of jurisdiction. And so there's a lot of transparency issues that are a concern for municipalities and growing. And that lack of transparency by the government, simply thinking they can bring in a sledgehammer piece of legislation instead of dealing with the issue that they've created in the first place.
All right, thanks. We're going to open things up to questions. Please specify whether you have a question for MLA Morris or MLA Milobar. And we'll start things off with Mayor Baines.
Sure, this question is for both of you. So would you rather have a municipality go back and forth, just according to whoever's elected as mayor, to go back and forth on a police transition? Let's say in this case it was Doug McCallum who said let's go forward with it. Then you have Brenda Locke who says no, we're not going to go. You could have another mayor who says okay, let's go back. So would you rather have that than what we want to see?
Maybe I'll venture into this first. I look at anything, if you're going to build something, you need to start with a solid foundation. And we didn't start with a solid foundation on this, and all the processes since that initial report have been flawed. I'm agnostic as to what shoulder patch the police agency wears. All the police in British Columbia and across Canada are guided by legislation, policies, laws, and whatnot that have been well established. The standard operating procedures are all the same. What we need is the municipality to make their decision and move forward with that decision without any interference from any other level of government. They're the ones that are paying the bill. And this process started out flawed. It was identified as flawed by the municipality, and those flaws have been kept hidden from view from us as opposition members to determine exactly what information the minister used to make his decision on this. So I don't like to see flip-flop back and forth. I like to see certainty, but this was built on a flawed foundation.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the history of the Police Act as it stands, this is a very unique situation. And so thinking that municipalities would be doing these types of changes on a regular basis just simply doesn't bear out in what we've seen across the province. Richmond has long looked at whether or not to keep the RCMP or not. They've chosen to stay with the RCMP. Even from Kamloops' point of view, when I was the mayor there was discussions around when we signed the 20-year contract as municipalities whether or not that was the time to be looking at an independent Kamloops police force or not, and the decision was to continue on with the RCMP. So these discussions happen regularly in the province, but there's not this type of whipsawing, and the one consistent piece on this, regardless of who's been in the mayor's office in Surrey and which badge is on somebody's shoulder, is that Minister Farnworth has been in the middle of this, the NDP government has been in the middle of this, without providing that transparency and clarity that people actually need on a wide range of issues, not the least of which is what is the true cost of the plan that the province wants to see implemented in Surrey versus what the status quo would have been.
Follow here.
Sure, where does your party see the overall future of policing? Do you see, the province going towards a provincial police force or sticking with the RCMP? Because these are some of the larger discussions that seem to be happening in the background. So where do you see it going?
You know, policing is complex, and when you look at all the various jurisdictions that we have in BC, you know, it adds to the complexity. But I think we took a big step forward back when, in the early 2000s, when we brought in the prime database that all police forces operate under in the province. And my experience as a senior police officer, as an investigator, even as a solicitor general, was that all police departments in BC were sharing information, they were collaborating with each other, they were sharing resources, and I think the public safety element of that is paramount when we look at that. So what I find is politics gets in the way oftentimes of doing good police work. And we need to keep the politics out of it and let the police do the job to keep our community safe.
Richard Zussman, Global News.
I'm trying to understand what information you're looking for other than cost. There was a report that was done by the province that was made available to the public. The city of Surrey did a report that was never made available to the public. You seem to be blaming the province for holding back information, but other than the cost, what information is lacking?
When I was sitting in the Sol Gens chair and as a senior police manager as well, I relied on the statistical information. I looked at the caseload that each officer had in the various detachments that we had. When you start creeping above that 50 criminal caseloads per member, it puts undue pressure on the membership and the detachment. And when you get into, you know, caseloads that are over 100, that's when mistakes are made with criminal policing and whatnot. So when I look at those statistics, I look at Surrey as being a very well policed organization, a very well policed community. The statistical data doesn't indicate that there's any real public safety issues within the city of Surrey. So I'm curious as to what information the minister used to determine that public safety is a major issue and a major threat moving forward.
You don't buy this idea that staffing is the concern. The RCMP could not possibly produce enough officers to properly police the community?
Don't buy that for a minute. No, you know, again, that was my career for 32 years. I understand how the staffing process works. All police agencies across Canada are facing difficulties in recruiting the numbers that they need, but it's not detrimental to fulfilling the obligations that the RCMP have or any other police force has for that matter.
Katie DeRosa, thank you for your time.
If the province is going to force Surrey to move ahead with the transition, should it increase that 150 million offer that's on the table?
You know, under the Police Act, the municipality is responsible for the costs of policing. And this is what the mayor of Surrey has kept in mind as she's moved forward with her argument on this. So they are burdened already with the responsibility of paying for the cost of policing. But when it is imposed on them with this sledgehammer attack that is being taken by the minister in this case, I think that the government should be taking some responsibility for that as well. This is their decision. This is not the decision of Surrey.
Just on that. And just on that as well, certainly the shared administration costs would be nothing close to what the overall transition cost of Surrey would be. But again, there's that broader provincial impact, not just around resources of manpower and womanpower of the force, but also what does this mean for other municipalities and their budgets as they head into their next budget year in terms of those extra cost pressures that they will feel on the administrative side of the charge, and what does that do? And is the province going to backstop those communities as well, or is it simply money for Surrey and everyone else is left on their own?
Okay. Andrew? Wolf?
Yeah, Avail Morris earlier spoke about usurping the sanctity of communities to choose their own policing. But the last time I checked, municipalities are not their own order of government. They exist at the behest of the provinces. So the province is acting within its legal rights here.
Under section 3 of the Police Act, it says that the municipalities can choose having their own police department. They can choose to contract with another existing police department, or they can contract with the RCMP, provincial force, to provide that municipal element. So those are the choices that are available to the mayor and councils right across British Columbia.
But just follow up, the province is not doing anything illegal. The province is within its legal rights to impose this decision on Surrey.
Well, I disagree with that. I think the province is taking that option away from the municipalities, and I think this should be putting all municipalities in BC on notice.
Just quickly though on that, again, we saw the decision where they brought in, like this government brought in legislation to force it regardless of what courts might say around rezoning in Vancouver. We have seen this on housing and the naughty list, so-called naughty list on housing, and the government imposing their rules on municipalities when they're feeling the heat on a certain topic or a certain pressure. On this case, when we see pressure mounting within Surrey as to the mishandling of this file, we see another piece of sledgehammer legislation to try to clean up a mess that the government created in the first place, while still trying to point the fingers back at municipalities as being the problem instead of taking any ownership of their part in what's transpired over the last 4 to 5 years.
Mila?
So I was wondering, the RCMP has said that they have issues with staffing, and so in the future years, do you think that municipalities should move away from the RCMP to maybe move them to other things that might come more putting them in other places? So should municipalities move with their own police force?
Again, under the Act, they have the option of making those 3 choices that I alluded to earlier on. But again, I go back to, based on my experience as a police investigator, as a police supervisor, as a police manager, and as a solicitor general, it doesn't matter what shoulder patch you wear on your shoulder in bringing forward policing to any community, because you all follow the same standard operating procedures. You have to follow the law, the legislation, the jurisprudence. So there's no real difference there. The only real difference in policing that I found over my many years is in the resourcing of those police departments. And the more police officers you add to a police force, the lower the crime rate or the caseload per member, and the more efficient they become in producing criminal reports and whatnot. So that's the only difference.
Follow up with that?
And so do you think that the province should fund more for the police officers if you say resources is an issue?
Well, again, so when you have municipalities like Surrey who are responsible for 90% of the policing costs, that's up to them. And they negotiate that with the detachment commander, and they look at it and they try to risk out certain areas, just like all the other municipal contracts that the RCMP look after in British Columbia. When it gets to the point of, and this is where the minister has alluded to section 2, where he has to ensure that there's an adequate and efficient level of policing, there's no metrics around that. So it's based on these crime stats, it's based on a number of factors that he has to take into consideration, and as I did as the Solicitor General as well. Most of the municipalities in BC, most of the independent forces do extremely well in trying to find that balance for their particular communities.
Vaughn, anything for you? Good. Emily? All right, seeing no further questions, thank you everyone for your time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We should just start calling these tech briefings.